Secrets from a Coach. Thrive and maximise your potential in the evolving workplace. Your weekly podcast with Debbie Green of Wishfish and Laura Thompson-Staveley of Phenomenal Training. Debs, where has my co-pilot gone? Well, as they say, best laid plans and all that. Debs has been called away to a minor family emergency, so we are going to keep the show running because actually it's very relevant to the topic that we've got for this episode number 202. And this one is the third in our four-part focus looking at leadership. The first one was the timeless stoic approach to leadership principles. The second one was if you're thinking of making the move to first-time leader or you've been familiar with that experience, how to convert all those anxieties and worries into excitement and focus. And this third one is looking at leading people well through change. Surely one of the major topics of our time. So depending on when you're listening to this, we are at the midway point of this shape-shifting decade. We had a pandemic to contend with at the start in 2020, and who knows what is awaiting for us as we head towards 2030. But what this decade has absolutely shown is really important is how to lead people well, positively, optimistically, and visibly. Now is not the time for leaders to hide away having whispered conversations in back rooms because change can be really unsettling. So what's your experience of change? If you were to think of 5 words that you associate with the words change, how many of those would be positive? How many of those would you class as negative? And that's one of our favourite exercises we like to do on change leadership sessions is you first of all ask people to write a list of 10 words that you associate with the word change. And then we get people into groups of 5 or 6, and it's an opportunity to look at how many shared universal words there are. So a word that everyone has used to describe change. And typically what you find is there's never any shared words because it is such a unique experience. There might be some common themes: challenge, uncertainty, opportunity, and growth. So, there are words that might be some familiar ones. But actually, each of us has a different experience of change. And what does that mean from a leadership perspective? Well, it means being able to understand, actually, what's the impact and the influence I want to have? And what does that mean in terms of how I lead people well? So imagine that I've got Debs here as my co-pilot. She's always there in our minds. And of course, you might have had some experiences where you've got to keep flying the plane, but actually you've got to adapt and you've got to be agile. And if you can see behind me, if you're watching this on the video, if you're not, imagine that you can see behind me a great big stuffed toy panda and a big stuffed toy fox. So first of all, what we're going to look at, the concepts of leading people well through change, is we're going to have a look at mindset. So what does it mean to tap into your own change leadership mindset and to encourage and support others to do the same? And we're going to go way back in time to Charles Darwin's Survival of the Fittest. And we often find using metaphors like animals, for example, is although we might have different words to describe change, we can all see lessons from nature in terms of what that means to thrive through change and not just survive. So let's first of all have a look at mindset. So what does that mean from a mindset point of view to lead people well through change? Okay, so Charles Darwin, however many hundreds of years ago, came up with his survival of the fittest idea. And what that means is I don't have to be the strongest, I don't have to be the most experienced, I don't have to be the most qualified leader in order to be able to adapt and deal with a really rapidly changing work environment. As Darwin said, the secret formula is adaptability. Can my rate of internal change match or preferably exceed, if we want to be innovative, the pace of external change? So let's say you're working in an industry where you've got to do more and you've got to deliver more with less resource. Let's say you're working in an industry where there's been a sudden upturn or downturn in demand. Let's say you're working in a profession where things like AI have rapidly changed the expectations of what people are expecting. At some point, there will be a team leader, or if you're a party of one, you'll be leading yourself in terms of thinking, well, what do we do? How do we manage this? How do we lead our way through change and to be able to make the best of it? So If we to take two figures from the animal kingdom, probably now is not the time to channel our inner panda. So pandas, we can't imagine life without pandas. I mean, it's the emblem of the World Wildlife Fund, for example. We just can't imagine the planet without pandas. But they would be extinct if it wasn't for the fact that we've conserved them because they're so gorgeous to look at. But a panda has three fatal flaws that makes it very challenge. It finds it very challenging to be able to adapt. And if we transfer this into our human world, see what thoughts come into mind. So first off, a panda can only eat bamboo. So once that bamboo runs out, it finds it a real challenge to then be able to think of its plan B. So let's say that you've got years, months, decades of experience doing your role or delivering your service or delivering your sales or whatever your outcome is in a certain way. And you become very, very efficient at that. Very, very good. Panda's very good at eating bamboo, and you become very efficient at it. But actually the cost of that is you might not have had much practice of doing it in a slightly different way. So you might be leading a team who are very confident, very effective, very efficient in the bamboo task, because that's what they've been doing. But suddenly the world requires them to do something else. And actually that might be really stressful. The second challenge that a panda has is bamboo is really low in calorie value. So it has to eat for 18 hours a day, which sounds quite fun. But if we take that across to the human task world, the busier we are, the busier a team is, the less time and space you have to be able to upskill, look for innovation. I'm sure most people would want to feel like they were on the front foot when there's lots of change. But if you've been really busy, just being able to try and cope with the current workload, then where's that time to be able to... Sorry, Charlie. Go back a little bit. I'm sure most teams would want to feel like they're on the front foot in terms of handling change, but the busier you are, the less time and space you might have had to be able to get prepared. And the third challenge that a panda has is it reaches for its food. It doesn't run for its food. So it has a very small map of the world in terms of what's going on. And we hear phrases like teams working in silos. I wonder, are people purposely not wanting to collaborate, or are they just too busy trying to deal with the task list that is there in front of them? So what does this mean from a leadership perspective? This means, in terms of messaging, being able to reduce panic and increase calm, composed, confident messages around change. Often there's more staying the same than there is actually changing. And it's about also not sort of belittling people or maybe being disrespectful of all the hard work that has gone into the bamboo. So actually, sometimes even the word change, it might be softer, gentler, more inclusive, more respectful to use phrases like evolve and build upon. Because if you've got a bunch of new people coming into a team saying everything needs to change, what about the half that have been there diligently making the successes of yesterday to arrive at today's point to be able to change? So actually, in terms of that kind of in-group, out-group, where you might have old school teams mixing in with new people that have joined, from a leadership perspective, being able to wrap your arms around that messaging so that the new people feel included and inspired to be able to bring their ideas, and the people that have been there, since the dawn of time or, sort of there for years, don't feel like they're suddenly out of favor because they're part of the old group. So that panda mindset is sometimes resistance or reluctance to change isn't just because someone has a stubborn, steadfast refusal to change. They might have been really busy. They might have been really diligent, putting lots of passion and pride into how things have been done, those structures that have enabled us to arrive at today. But from a leadership perspective, being able to encourage people to step out of that silo. So introducing different teams with each other, inviting people to come to meetings where they wouldn't normally be in it, just to get a bit of fresh air in terms of that perspective, reminding people that probably more is staying the same than is changing. So it might be you're using a new bit of software, it might be a new process, you might have a hub set up rather than each department having their own go-to person. There might be more staying the same than there is actually changing. So reducing that kind of panic. And also giving people a chance to be able to practice, so to be able to feel confident in terms of trying out those new things. However, It's easy being a panda short term. I mean, who wouldn't want to be sitting there eating for 18 hours a day, rolling around looking cute? So even as a leader, you might have one eye, a bit of news, you might know what's around the corner. So it's also about not pandering to your inner panda and being able to embrace the fox mindset. So what does it mean to be a fox? Well, love them or hate them, foxes are just natural born adapters. They can turn their paw from 1 minute hunting wild prey in the forest, and then the next minute foraging around in our bins. So the thing that a fox can do is it's still a fox. It's just how it goes about its day to day might then change, given that the environment in which they are brought up in might change. So that fox mindset is being able to recognize that the past is for reference, not for residence. So we used to do it this way, but actually we're going to build on that, and also not fearing maybe gaps in knowledge. So rather than a gap in knowledge that might feel like we're a bit frightened about it, it's seen as a space to be able to create. Foxes are really great at working together to be able to achieve stuff. And that idea of embracing your fox mindset, being adaptable, agile, and it's a nice little 4-letter word to describe some of the toughest days. If you can say, I've had a foxy day of a day. And from a leadership perspective, leading from the front, people can only be what they see. And if they see their leader actively looking for opportunities to stretch and grow and develop themselves, then that's going to remove that air of fear about having to be perfect. It's very tricky to be perfect through times of change because there might be some unprecedented new things that you're asking people to do, and being able to lead from the front. So being that fox right out of the front, which of course is why you got to look after your self-care, because foxes don't always look bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. We might see them lying on the side of the road, looking a bit mangy, and self-care is really important. So from a leadership perspective, from a mindset, a lot of this is going to require energy. It takes energy to be foxy. It takes less energy to be a panda. But in terms of empowerment, it means that there's that sense of whatever the world's going to chuck at us next, we're going to be able to adapt and thrive our way through it. And you've got to look after your self-care, because your energy levels now are probably an indicator of how much energy you'll have as a leader this time next year. So what's your takeaway from this idea of a foxy perspective, from a mindset? Let's now have a look at the typical stages that people and teams go through when they're dealing with externally delivered changes. Sorry, Charlie. Let me do that tail again. So let's now have a look at the typical stages that teams and individuals go through when dealing with external change. Okay, so one of the favourite slides that we all show as a team, one of those kind of bits of carousel of content that we give a wash and brush up and change the font every now and then, but it's still one that sparks some really useful conversation. So as a leader, being aware of the typical ups and downs known as the change curve can be really useful on 3 fronts. Number one, it enables you to be able to protect yourself against the behaviours and actions of others, to take other people's behaviours a little bit less personally. People might be angry, but they might be using the conversation they're having with you as that chance to vent rather than taking it personally. It enables you to be able to look after yourself and feel a bit prepared. So if, for example, the team are likely to be experiencing uncertainty, is to make sure that you are prepared with some questions or some responses, so you're able to handle those questions. And it also enables you to be a bit strategic, so you can have one eye on, well, I'm delivering that message on Monday. What do I think are likely to be the types of conversations and reactions that people are going to have this time next week? So the benefit can be really useful to look at this idea of there being a change curve. So William Bridges, in his book Transitions, he makes this idea of seeing changes happen as having 3 phases. So something's got to end for there to be this kind of gloopy bit in the middle, for then something new to start. And the fun analogy I use is it's really tricky to find new love if you're still dating your ex. It's really tricky for a team to wrap their heads around a new way of working if they're still secretly doing it the old way. And so as a leader, what that then means is we have to be one step ahead, so people know that there is a pilot there at the front of the cockpit. Our plans might have diverted, our plans might have changed, but we're still safe with you as our leader. So this is the typical stages that we might see. And as I take you through the sort of ups and downs, the analogy often used is a roller coaster. So that kind of ups and downs. And the reason why you have a leader, could it be just to keep everyone's eyes on the horizon so they feel a little bit less scared and a little bit less queasy as we're sort of going around those ups and downs? So typically there's a bit of shock at the start. oh my goodness, I can't believe that change is happening. We're hearing a lot where actually the leader might be receiving that news at the same time. So the benefit of this change curve is it means that you can quickly get into response mode rather than reaction mode, because the last thing passengers on a plane need to hear is the pilot panicking. So that shock is that first stage of where people think, oh my goodness, that's actually happening. And then the brain's little defense system kicks in, and typically you then get into denial, which is, nah, that's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to go through, or I don't think that's going to impact my role. And that's that bit of defense just to sort of alleviate the shock. Then there's a bit of anger. What? How dare they? Don't they know the impact this is going to have? And then they might be coming to you as the leader to have these really angry conversations. And then there might be a bit of apathy. So, do you know what? I can't care this much. So that's where that defense kicks in. And that's where people think, do you know what? I was going to keep my head below the parapet. I'm just going to keep quiet, let them. And that might be where you start to see a drop in morale and a drop in motivation. And then a bit of confusion might kind of come in, which is this happening? Is it not? And people get a bit irritated because they want to know what's happening. And then maybe a little bit of optimism. Okay, maybe it's not as bad as what I thought it was going to be. And then we arrive eventually at engagement, which is it's just all part of yesterday's news. We're no longer focusing on that because there might be something new that's around the corner. So this change curve, these ups and downs, could it be that one of the biggest skills that we can equip ourselves, our teams, our children with is to be able to be resilient through these ups and downs of change? Because that's probably one thing we can rely on. There will always be change, and it's how do we then handle that in a way that means we can look back with pride and we can look forward with hope. And actually, there's been lots of conversations that we've been running in sessions recently with leaders about keeping hopeful and giving people almost that beacon of light, not in a patronising way, but in a realistic way. And one of the most comforting little phrases that can really help is a reminder of no feeling is final. How you feel about something now, you might feel completely different about it in 3 months' time, because every time you sleep, your brain processes that info. And one of the things around that change curve is, as a leader, you may have had a heads up a couple of months or a couple of weeks or just a couple of moments before that all team briefing. And the more time you've had to process it, the easier it is to then remain emotionally intelligent and aware of the impact you want to have. So those ups and downs of change, what have you learned about yourself and teams and people's responses and reactions through change? What are some bits of wisdom that you think would be useful to carry forward and take into whatever change is around the corner? And this is where just this final bit with the change curve is just almost putting the difference between managing change and leading through change. Managing people is where you're almost maintaining the day-to-day. So let's say, I like to use the analogy of leading people up and over a mountain. So the manager perspective will be checking, has everyone got what they need? Have we got water? Have we got supplies? Have we got the right equipment? Because this is the plan, and I'm here to make sure the plan is managed. But what happens if halfway up the mountain, the weather takes a turn in direction? Someone has got to be looking at one step ahead, and that's the leadership perspective. So I can see, if I look a little bit further, the manager is aside of me, is ensuring everyone's got what they need for right now. But the leadership aspect of me is checking, have we got anything? Have we got everything that we need for whatever might be ahead? And actually, over the years, we've run loads of sessions where manager versus leader. It's like a classic flip chart exercise you might do on a session, on a management or a leadership session. And it's a duality role now. So if you're a leader, you probably need to do quite a bit of managing, checking everyone's got what they need for right now, as well as leading people forward for whatever the mountain ranges ahead. If you're a manager, there's probably an aspect of your role where there needs to be leadership, which is to be able to look one step ahead and to lead people into the future, not just manage the current and the present moment. So that change curve enables you to bring that leadership perspective. And you might not have leadership in your title. This is leadership with a little L. So I'm not a formal leader. I don't line manage a team. We all work as a collaboration, but there absolutely are daily moments of where we might need to make decisions. That means we need to step up and step into that leadership role. Just even using the initiative to ask a question at a meeting in that moment is leading yourself and leading that conversation. Because if you're there on that plane and you happen to be sitting near the emergency exit, wanted or not, if an emergency kicks in, you've got to take the lead in that moment. So this goes out to all us accidental leaders out there. If you're looking at your team around you, your colleagues, and you're thinking, I actually think people need a bit of a cheering up, or they need a bit of insight, or we need a bit of a focus, then at that point, what opportunity have you got to be able to take the lead in that moment? So this second little chunk has been looking at the change the change curve. And the benefit of that is threefold. Number one, it enables you to protect yourself against the behaviours and actions of others. It's probably not you. They're just using you as a sounding board in that moment through the ups and downs of the roller coaster. Enables you to be able to have one eye on the next step. So you're able to think, actually, how can I be prepared for what might be around the corner? The third thing is, even if you receive the news at the same time as your team, you're able to get into response mode rather than reaction mode, and to take that leadership, because what people want on a plane that is getting a little bit turbulent is they want to know there's someone who's safely got their hands on the wheel, or whatever it's called in a plane. Don't get on a plane with me. So that's our second section. Let's have a look at some tips, some practical tips in that moment that can then help to be able to lead ourselves and others well through change. Okay, so let's have a look at some practical everyday tips, just some food for thought. Not only will we able to think about our mindset and being foxy and encouraging others as well, we've also had to think about the change process and the change curve, so we can be mindful of the impact we have on others and lead people well. And this third bit looks at some practical tools that can help keep your own head straight when there's lots of ups and downs around change, so you can role model that and support your teams through change. So the first tip is the classic, focusing what you can control and not what you can't control. So let's say you work in an industry where a government decision has made a big difference to the way in which you're going to have to work now and into the future. You might not be able to do anything about that government decision. That might be way out of your focus of influence. But what might be in your circle of influence is being able to retain a sense of certainty that whatever we do, we're going to be able to do it in a way with a plan, and we're going to be able to keep focused on how we as a team can step up into this challenge. So the outcome may be uncertain, but there is an air of certainty about how you're going to lean in and how you're going to be able to do that. So when there's lots of change happening, the only thing you can really focus on is your thoughts, your actions, and your behaviours. And so what does that mean in terms of being able to step out and into that change scenario? 3 questions that can help is what I'm thinking logical, helpful, true? So if I'm sitting there and I'm spending days thinking about all the things that the government should or shouldn't have done, is what I'm thinking logical? Is it helpful? Is it true? And if I can answer no to any of those, then actually the next question would be, so what is the best thing that I can do right now? And what that does is it focuses your attention right into that circle of influence. There might be lots of stuff that concern and worry me, but actually what can I do that can influence? And that might even be the definition of change leadership in itself. The world is getting noisier and noisier, and that leadership approach is being able to focus on the signal out of that noise and to be able to keep the team focusing. The second tip is to be able to handle setback in a way that means we can view it as a fall forward, which might sound a little bit sort of cheesy and a little bit over optimistic, when you sort of hear that phrase. But what has life shown us? There's always going to be setbacks and challenges. And as the Stoics on our first part of this 4-part focus on leadership focus, actually there's an advantage of dealing with those adversities. So in terms of handling setback, well, keeping the language of preference in mind. So thank you, Alexis Neighbour, who first introduced this to me many years ago. I know this is a faves of Deb's as well. So being able to practice the high frustration tolerance. So let's say that there's been some unwanted change. It just seemed to be like you had a plan in place and then boom, key figure resigns, or someone announces that they're going off on leave, or there's been a complete change in terms of how a process is going to be done. To use the language of preference can help keep you focused and keep your hands on the wheel. Rather than, this is going to be a nightmare, we're never going to be able to do this, very dramatic language, it keeps things cool and calm. Our preference would be that we didn't have yet another version that we've got to go out with, but it is what it is. And as a team, we'll step up. And as we have shown many times before, we'll be able to deal with this challenge in the best way that we can. And that certainty, so we even can't with the drop tone of voice, the command tone of voice at the end, rather than as a team, we'll do the best that we can. Anxiety. As a team, we'll do the best that we can. So it's that command tone of voice and just being able to keep that sort of air of certainty. So the second tip is thinking about how am I going to handle setbacks? So if the one thing that we can predict is the predicted plans are likely to change, is already being on the front foot with, well, how might we handle some of those setbacks? So the stumbles become the fall forwards. Using that plane analogy, the last thing you want to hear is a pilot panicking or being silent. You want to hear that there is someone calmly focused on what we're doing might be uncertain, but we are certain that we are doing something. So it's that air of certainty, even though you might not be able to control the outcome, we're certain we're going to bring the best aspect forward. And then the third tip is to keep focusing on the relationships. Processes come and go. Trends and fashions come and go. Sometimes people might be focusing on profit. Sometimes people might be focusing on service, whatever the measure is. Sometimes you might be stepping things up because there's an audit or a CQC or some kind of inspection happening. So things and priorities and pressures will come and go. But what stays resilient is those relationships. And could it be that the biggest gift a leader can bring to a team through times of change is to maintain good relationships with their teams? That sense of, well, the world might be getting crazy, we might have lots of challenges and setbacks, but I feel safe with my leader. I feel like I'm in a team where I belong. And I feel like, and I think that we are all going to be okay. We might not be able to predict exactly what we're going to be able to do, but it's focusing on those relationships. Because on that roller coaster ride, that sense of being part of a team, it's that buffer. It's a lot easier to be able to deal with those ups and downs of change if you feel like you're not the only one. So if you're leading teams that are in a hybrid team, what opportunity have you got to have some gatherings? If it's physically impossible to be chemically there in a room together and have that team chemistry, then what does that mean to have some of those team gatherings, some of that social chit chat, just to get a bit of that kind of team belonging? Because when people say what keeps you here in a role, it's the people. And if as a leader there isn't time to be able to get people together, then potentially that's going to make change feel a bit big and a bit scary. So time together as a team can really help buffer. It's almost like the seatbelt on that on that roller coaster ride. So we've been looking at Foxy mindset. We've been looking at the change curve. So to be able to have one eye on the front foot as a leader. So not just managing the day to day, but leading for whatever, a team for whatever's next. And we've had a look at 3 simple tips, focusing on what is in your control, having an idea as to how you want to handle setback with a calm air of assured certainty, and keeping focused on the relationships, because that's what will stand the test of time. Jobs will come and go, changes will come and go, but it's the people and it's the impact that we have on each other. That's the stuff that stays in our memories for a lifetime. So if Debs were here, I know her call to action would be: get yourself a notebook or some kind of digital, or tattoo it on if you're fully committed. Remind yourself of your purpose and your values. Why am I doing what am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What's the impact I want to have on others? That's your purpose. And what are my 5 core values? You can count them on one hand. What are my 5 core values? And if you're clear with why am I leading, how do I want to lead, my values, then that can help lean in and step out into conversations that might not be easy ones, but it means that people then feel safe with you and you feel safe in your own hands as well. And my share the secret would be, if you know a friend of yours or a colleague of yours who is a pilot, piloting some stormy weather clouds at the moment, get them to listen to this, because one of the key phrases we hear from pretty much every workshop between us as a team that we all run is, I'm glad it's not just me. You're not alone. Leading people well through change. If it was that easy, robots would be doing it. It's a very human skill set in some very human testing times. But what the world needs now is visible, capable, assured, kind leadership. So we wish you well. Have a great week, and we'll see you at the next one. Deb sends her love. She's going to be pressing the ejector seat and coming back in with me. So we'll see you at the next one. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at contact@secretsfromacoach.com or follow us on Insta or Facebook. If you're a Spotify listener, give us a rating, as it's easier for people to find us. And if you want to know more, visit our website, www.secretsfromacoach.com, and sign up for our newsletter, here to cheer you on and help you thrive in the ever-changing world of work.